Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far in, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that helps out with my channel a great deal. And also, before we get started, I wanted to thank some people. To start with, I have a new patron over on Patreon. Her name is Peggy D, and I appreciate you signing up, and I really appreciate your support. That goes for my other patrons over there who've been supporting me along the way. And I really enjoy the community over there, and I hope that you guys are getting as much out of it as I am. Another group I'd like to thank are my YouTube subscribers. We passed 8,300 recently. That's pretty amazing to me, and I really appreciate their support. I also appreciate the support of all the people who've been buying me coffees and things like that. That's basically a cash infusion for me, so it helps me to have some money to buy materials, which you run out of over time. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Today, I'm going to do something that is kind of ornate. It's going to have a moonstone and what I think is a piece of pale topaz in it. It's going to be kind of swirly, and I hope it turns out pretty. I guess we'll see in a little bit. So let's get started on that project. So we got a package in the mail today, and it was from somebody who's been commenting on my channel for a long time. And I really wanted to say thank you to her. She sent me a number of nice gifts. The one, though, that made me laugh was she sent me this bag balm, which is a hand, something you put on your hands to take care of them, because she's been watching my terribly abused hands over the past couple of years, and I think she was taking pity on me. But that was really kind of her. She also sent me some really pretty stones and shells and things. So. She goes by Flying Chef. You've probably seen her comments in the comment section. So thank you, Flying Chef. I really appreciate it. If you want to see some of her stuff, I'll give you a link to a place where you can check out her, I think it's her Instagram. So she's a very talented artist, and I think she might have some really cool stuff you'd like to see. So, all right, so here's my design idea book. These are in my merch store if you're interested. I have found that in recent times, it gives me a distinctly better outcome if I draw things up a little bit in advance. So I'm going to do something kind of frilly and ornate today. I have, this is sort of funny too. I wanted to do something with a kind of a pear-shaped stone, and I didn't really have one the size that I wanted, so I think what I'm going to do, and this will probably make it look even a little frillier and ornate, is I'm going to instead use a smaller one like this and then frame it with some like 16 gauge round wire and connect it with some balls to the rest of the piece here. The other stone is going to be a little bit little topaz. It's got a slightly blue tinge to it, so I'm guessing it's topaz. It could be an aquamarine, but I'm not 100% sure. Some aquamarines are very pale. But we're going to put that up here. And I made a little bezel setting for that in advance, just because there's going to be a lot of detail work on this one. So if you want to see how to make a bezel setting for a faceted stone, I'll put a link right up here for you. So the funny thing is about this stone, though, is I spent about 10 minutes earlier crawling around on the ground under my table looking for this, because I do this all the time. I sweep stuff out of the way, and I swept the stone right off the table, and I had to look for it for a while. So I've heard that from a lot of other people who make jewelry. They spend much of their time crawling around on the ground looking for stones. So, all right, so let's get started. I'm going to make a little bezel for this first, and then we'll start building up around it and see where it goes. So, and I did use the bag balm, so thank you for that. I hope it'll make my hands a little bit better, because they're pretty trashed most of the time. For the bezel, we're going to be using 3/16. I'm having trouble talking today. For the bezel, we're going to be using 3/16 of an inch fine silver bezel strip in 28 gauge. I'm going to do it because this is a very small stone. I'm going to use kind of thin one for this. For this one, though, I think I'm going to use 26 gauge of the same stuff. So think about it. Some days my words just aren't working. with teardrop shapes like this, I usually make a sharp bend with the pliers in order to get the bezel started. You never want to end a bezel right on the point of a stone. That's it's really hard to get it to turn out to be a good bezel if you do that. We'll be soldering these two ends together, so having a bunch of solder right at the tip of the stone is not something that you really want. So I realize when I'm doing this, sometimes my finger sticks out and that's covering what I'm doing. If you've never watched my videos before, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder, and I use a liquid flux called My-T-Flux that I spray on with a spray bottle. The other thing people always ask me about is my torch. I use a Silversmith torch, which is an air acetylene torch. I use it with a #1 tip generally. I have a couple little pieces of solder on the pad already, so I'm just going to grab one of those. Right on that. I'm just reshaping it into the shape of the stone. Looks like I did okay on the size this time. That's a pretty good fit. For the bottom, I'm going to use 26 gauge sheet. This is not going to be a place that needs to be particularly strong structurally, so I can get by with thin sheet like that. There's my 26. Okay, I'm just going to grab a corner here, cut a little piece off. Cut ourselves a few pieces of solder. If you haven't seen any of my beginner-ish projects, the reason I leave a little bit of sheet around the outside like this is because if you cut just the same amount, or just a little bit around the outside of the bezel so not much sticks out, it's hard to get that piece of sheet up to the 1450-ish degrees it needs to be before the bezel sitting on top of it, which is far more exposed to the flame, before that one gets too hot. So it gives you a little spot to kind of point the heat at. I'm just going to put 3 or 4 of these in there. And you don't have to lean them, but they do need to be touching the sides. Now I'm just going to trim off the excess sheet. Let's kind of file this flush. This will likely be filed down quite a bit before we're done, because I definitely don't need it to be that tall. I like to buy that taller stuff because it's good for most stones. And if you want it shorter, you can just cut or file it short. It'll be good. Okay, so like I said, for this one, I need to make a pear-shaped piece of wire that goes around it, and I think I'm going to use 16. So let's find my 16 gauge iron. I think if I want it to have a relatively sharp pear shape like that, I need to do something that causes it to be able to be bent a little more sharply. And so I'm going to go ahead and just about maybe a 5 or 6 millimeters in, 3/8 of an inch, probably 7 or 8 millimeters then. Then kind of a sharp bend or cut like that, and then we'll be able to bend it sharply. Kind of like that. That's a little bit too steep, so I may bend it outwards just a tiny bit. Then you can hold it right here like this. You can kind of let the natural tension of in the wire kind of help you shape it. You got a relatively good pear shape just by doing that. So I think I want it a little bit tighter than that. So I'll shorten this bend up a little bit. I like that better. So let's go there. I'm going to cut these both off about the same spot. Oopsie, I cut it backwards. It's been one of those days I've not been firing on all cylinders. Not sure why. So for this, I'm going to solder it right there to make that a permanent bend like that, and then right there as well. I'm also going to do something that I do a lot, probably more than many people do, but it's called pick soldering, and it allows you to place a little tiny bit of solder right where you want it. And I think it's a useful skill, and if you're interested in learning how to do that, I have a video about it. I'll put a link right there. Okay, let's solder this guy together. There's plenty of little bits of solder here that I have scattered around the pad. Pick soldering, you just find a piece that you want. Melt the solder onto the end of the pick here. You heat the piece up to the temperature it needs to be for the solder to jump onto it like that, and so it just goes right on. There's a little bit more solder. Do this other one. The trick to doing it well is to not put the solder in until you think the piece is up to that 1450 degrees that it requires to be, that it needs to be in order to melt the solder to it. I pre-made a few balls just so I have a selection. Maybe like that. That looks pretty good. Let's solder those on and see how it turns out. You can make silver balls if you've never done this before by just melting scrap wire on a charcoal block like this. It seems to make nicer balls if you do it on a charcoal block. I think to start with, so it doesn't jump around on me, I'm going to solder that one in first, and then we'll position this and the other one so that we can get them where we want them to be. There's probably enough solder up in that solder joint to attach it anyway. Sometimes things move a little bit, and as long as you can get all the solder joints liquefied that are holding them there, you can just move them around with a little practice. That's why learning to control the heat is really important. I like that so far. So it's not exactly to scale, but it's close. So I'm thinking, I'm not sure if I'm going to do these balls around the outside or if I'm just going to do another border, but I am going to do the little kind of spirally things in there. So I'm going to make some little spirals out of 18 gauge and we'll see how that looks. $18 might be too big. Let me see if I can find some 20 gauge and we'll see how that works. That's more like the scale I need. I think I'm going to have to use 20, so. I didn't really talk about the bail, but I think I'm going to have some swirlies coming off this top one that curl around on themselves, and then I'll make a split chain with a jump ring on either end so we can attach it that way. That'll be a nice way to finish this one. We'll see how it turns out. Sometimes I'm very happy with how things turn out, and sometimes not so much. You just never know till you try sometimes. These little ends that are sticking out I'll be cutting shorter probably. Well, I kind of like that too. I kind of like it leaving these long things swirling out. I wasn't originally intending to do that, but it kind of gives it an interesting look, so I might do that. I think I'll start by soldering these two on. I'm going to make sure these are laying relatively flat. They don't have any sideways wobbles going on. And I was thinking I was going to cut these ones off right at the base like that. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do 3 loops there, and the top one's going to have a little silver ball in it. So let's do that. The good thing about silver and soldering silver is that when you screw up like I just did where I bumped this and moved it down further, a lot of times as long as you keep the heat where it needs to be, you can kind of shove things back into place. So I did a little bit of thinking off camera. I originally intended to do little balls all the way around, but that looks just a little too ballsy to me. So I think I'm going to use something different. I'm going to outline it with some 14 gauge square wire that I rolled through the rolling mill to flatten it out. And I want this to kind of still come to a point down here, like that, but then curve up around here and meet at the top, so it kind of gives it a border for the little laciness. And in order to get that sharp point on the bottom, I found the center of this piece, and I cut this extra long because I don't know exactly how much I'm going to need to get all the way around there. But I'm going to take the corner of my bastard file. Let's get that started. But that'll allow us to make a sharper bend there, so we get kind of a point on the bottom. And I think in order to keep that, from changing that tip, let's go ahead and solder it closed, and then we'll be able to shape the rest of it. It's just going to be some hand shaping. And I don't want this sitting way far below it. That looks pretty nice. Now, in order to get this to be relatively symmetrical, I need a little help sometimes. So I want it to kind of hug these wires. So let's make a mark where it needs to bend. That's where the bend really needs to start. I just had a brilliant thought. Well, brilliant for me. If I want to get this very symmetrical, why don't I just solder it just to the first point first. Right here and here, and then I should be able to shape it much more easily to get it nice and tight up against there. So let's do that. Oopsie. Cool this off. Now we should be able to bend it a little easier, I think. I was thinking it might be kind of nice if these at the top here curved up like this, and that'll be where I attach the other stone. I'm going to cut some of this off because I don't need near this much. Not sure if this is looking Victorian or maybe a little Art Nouveau-y, maybe Edwardian. Tell me what you think it looks like in the comments. So this one's going to go up here. Okay, cut these a little bit shorter. Try and get them as symmetrical as I can. One of the things I'm going to need to do if I'm going to attach it like this is I don't want these tall ends here to get in the way of setting that stone. So I'm going to taper these downwards so they're narrower at the top. But I still need to get them shaped the way they want, I think. Let's go ahead and solder this in. If things go as usual, I'll get it soldered in there and then I'll realize it's a little bit crooked. That seems to be my MO. The last two things I need to do are these little loops up here that I'm going to attach the chain to. So let's add those. I need to make those. This is one of those soldering times where you're soldering something big to something very small. So most of the heat needs to be put on the bigger piece because it takes longer for that piece to get up to soldering temperature. Versus the little piece, which will reach it very quickly, and then if you're not careful you melt it before you ever get the other piece up to soldering temperature. So most people as beginners learn that lesson quite a few times. So I think we have accomplished our pendant here, so I will cut those wires off a little bit. Without anything else going on wrong on me, everything feels pretty solid. So I'm going to go ahead and pickle that for a while, maybe have a little dinner, and then come back and finish it for you. I already made a chain for it when I was off camera a couple minutes ago, so once the stones are set and it's polished, we'll just add that chain and we'll be done. So I've got everything all polished up, and let's make sure you can see what I'm doing here. And I haven't set this stone yet. I went ahead and set this one just because it's kind of a tiny one, hard to see. Like I said, you can check out that other video I mentioned earlier, the faceting or bezel setting faceted stones, if you want to see how I did that. For this one, I'm just going to set it the way I normally would. I do this a little different than a lot of people. A lot of people use a bezel pusher and a burnishing tool. I just use the chain nose pliers, this flat spot here on it, and then the rounded outer part of this. So I'm just going to push it straight in while I'm pushing down with a little pressure with my thumb. Bezels with pointed spots on them, sometimes it's a good idea to thin it out just a little bit at the very top. Like file it a little bit thinner. That way it makes it a little easier to force that into that space there. You're kind of trying to force too much metal into too small of a space. So that makes it a little easier. Okay, last step is we're just going to do a little burnishing, where I just rub that top edge really hard, right where the stone and the bezel join. And that looks pretty good. So last step, like I said, I made up a little chain, put a little, I always have a bunch of broken old chains laying around, and then oftentimes there's a little clasp on them that you can use. Okay. Here's the original drawing. Like I said, I changed my mind about the basic shape of things here, and also this border on the outside. I kind of like this, the way it came out. I'm not sure what the shape is, but I think it's pretty, and I hope you enjoyed it. Alright, well that was the swirly Moonstone and Topaz pendant. I'm not sure what we're going to call it yet, but if you like the content here, would you mind hitting the like button before you leave? That helps out a lot. And also love to hear your comments if you have something to say about the channel, or suggestions, or ideas for videos. All those things are great. Before you go, you might want to check out my playlist page. I have all sorts of playlists. I've divided my videos into things like beginning, intermediate, advanced kind of categories, as well as project types like pendants or earrings. So it makes it a little easier to navigate the channel now that I have about 270 videos, I think it is. The other thing you might want to do is hit the video description down below. There's relevant links to the channel. There's a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to give me a little cash to help with supplies. There's a link to my merch store, which also helps to fund my channel here. And you can get yourself one of those nice design idea notebooks or something. There's a link to my website if you want to check out some jewelry for sale. And finally, there's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out about that. So, thank you for watching. I hope you have a great new year. Happy silversmithing.